school during the summer, because that's the first step. Is these are kids who would not normally be able to reach. No government program is going to reach these kids. But if you have something that is appealing to them, then once you get them there, you can teach them these other aspects, especially for the boys who mainly come from the sports.
So if you dropped all the sports classes, even though you got them there, would this be enough? The class on
Yeah, I don't think the
skills.
sports are like a key. I think they're mainly a way to promote social bonding, and they're fun. They're the first exposure they have to that kind of environment. And also, just from my own experience, I think sports can be a very, very valuable kind of learning ground. It's a way that you can set goals within it. You're going to lose some of the time. You have to work in teams. So it's a way to practice some of these skills that we're just talking about.
It's a growth mindset manipulation, if you think about it.
No?
Being in sports?
I don't think being in sports per se is a nice
No, it isn't.
But it can be used as.
Yeah, I mean, the lesson, the message that abilities are incremental, that persistence and hard work pay off.
If you create that framework for them.
No, but I'm just
otherwise it
saying,
could be a very
it's actually
talent-oriented.
something that's aspirational in academics is really explicit and obvious in sports. You practice a little bit, particularly for kids who are doing it.
She's shaking her head here.
You get better.
It's true that happens, but it's not true that everyone assimilates it into.
Right, no, you want to use it.
Yes,
As a
exactly.
metaphor, yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
So this is like the specific curriculum. So in each case, there's various principles I'm trying to emphasize. So it starts with their kind of possible selves, goes into their goals, how higher education benefits them. The second unit's more on their society, because I thought that'd be very important in the collectivist culture, because they're not motivated for themselves, they're motivated to help their families and their country. So this is a lot on their, the utility value of school, how it can benefit their society, but also like reflecting on their personal strengths, because they tend to be very humble and not, even the Vietnamese college students, they're not used to being very vocal leaders in front of the classrooms. That's something that they gain by being in the program. And then last is how to set proximal goals, engage in lifelong learning, develop growth mindset, overcome failure.
You could say a bit more about the comparison, both that exists in the world and the control condition, and that could exist in the world. So,
yeah.
So, one question is, what are they doing in the control group during the summer? Otherwise, another question is, what kinds of other programs exist for, rural Vietnamese youth, either government sponsored or NGO sponsored?
Yeah.
That would be different, and have they been evaluated, and how do their effects compare to these effects? And then a third question, which gets to your future directions question, is, what would a standard kind of economic intervention look like, and are there such things implemented in Vietnam? So, what are they doing? What are the things could exist either through the government or through NGOs? What's the economic solution? Just so that we can compare this program with its unique social psychological aspects to other kinds of possibilities.
So that was one aspect of the data I collected for my dissertation. What were they doing during the summer? A lot of it is helping their parents with chores. Some of them do tutoring classes. Some of them have part-time jobs, helping take care of their younger siblings. Sometimes playing with their friends in the neighborhood. These contexts are so kind of remote and rural that there is no other program. Like, it's kind of like do this or do their normal summer activities. There are no other programs or government interventions in these places. So that would be if there were, I would like to compare that. I guess with the traditional interventions, it seems like they've mostly focused on school inputs, like adding textbooks or an additional teacher, or sometimes financial aid or conditional cash transfers, deworming school meals, and that seems to be what the economists have focused on, and not in Vietnam, but in other developing countries.
So just to follow up, so then one question is do we learn here that a summer kind of education program works or could work in rural Vietnam? like if you, so you could imagine that this program could be very different. You could imagine a very different kind of summer educational program.
Yeah.
And we don't know whether or not that would be
Right.
that would be as effective or more effective,
Right.
or equally effective.
And I think that's something to test in the future.
It's an interesting design problem. I mean, I just think it's like an interesting discussion about how you can turn I don't know if you call it a kitchen sink approach, but make a kitchen sink approach into an interesting research design. And like so it's just an interesting topic. I don't know exactly what the answer is, but one possibility is to, have your program and then introduce a little tweak
Yeah.
or kind of small intervention that you can randomize at the individual level that you think would be like a bit of kindling or
Mhm.
catalyst that would make the program really go.
Right.
And I've just been thinking about this as an issue, because in the real world, the kitchen sink model is often what people are trying to do, with a few exceptions. And
Yeah.
maybe there's a way to kind of make, turn those situations into interesting research designs by crossing
Sure.
it with this approach.
Yeah.
I want to return to the issue of the fact that it's a summer program. My somewhat hazy recollection, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is if you look at disadvantaged groups or high SES versus low SES, you often see very similar levels of attainment during the 9 months of school, and then the more privileged kids maintain or go up a little bit, and the less privileged kids go down. So you get a kind of sawtooth thing where over time the difference is increasing, but the lion's share of that decrease is occurring over the successive summers.
Right.
Is that an accurate?
Yeah, seems like
Okay,
it.
so it would seem like a really obvious thing to focus on would be to look at whether you've erased, if there's some kind of measures, whether you've erased the normal summer decline or the normal gap that you see between privileged and non-privileged kids over the summer. I always found that result really striking and, I don't know how to put it, one of those things where it seemed to have the most obvious implication
Right.
is that that's what a target for intervention should be.
So, would you mean measure their GPA in the fall versus their GPA in the previous spring?
I would rather just have a skills measure.
Oh, okay.
Reading ability, for example.
Reading.
If that's
Okay.
what goes down over the summer.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
interesting.
There obviously are tests of this.
I was wondering if there were some Western psychological concepts that didn't work there, or whether you had to adjust some of them to make them more culturally relevant.
It was more in terms of analogies. I remember, I think at one point there was an analogy about the glass being half full, and that was something that they never heard of. Or in the Housing province, we had something about climbing a mountain, but they'd never seen mountains before, so we had to change it to raising a pig. So I think, so that's
Save
something.
that one for your next job talk. Thank you.
So the curriculum is something that we've kind of iterated over 7 years. It's definitely not perfect, but I think one of the ways that, because of this team teaching approach, the Vietnamese and American students discuss every night, what they're going to teach the next day. So even though they have the lesson plans, the Vietnamese can help explain any concepts that don't make sense to them, and then they can correct and make sure they explain them more clearly.
Yeah, I think it's so impressive what you've done. It's incredible. I have a couple of questions. You seem really sensitive to the cultural variation and very tuned into it. I'm wondering, did you find any clash between your focus, as Carol was just saying, it's all on building this very independent, individualistic self in a very culture that's not set up for that. I mean, as you said, people recognize they're doing it for their families, and so it works. But I wonder, did you have trouble fitting those together? Did parents complain? Did other siblings or friends who didn't get to be part of the camp? Because my own sense is once you build that independent agency, it's really hard to stuff it back in the bottle.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's out there and you want stuff, and you have goals, and you have preferences, and it's kind of it's a pretty picture if the environment supports it, but
Yeah.
not always. So that question, and also I think a bit related to Jason's question, which is, I've had some of my own experience in both in a program in Zambia and another one in India where the students get all of this and they even get the college education, but then there's no employment possibilities.
Yeah.
And so then that doesn't work very well. So is your sense that things are moving along in Vietnam so they'll be able to enter the workforce and jobs that'll match their
Sure.
training?
So for the first question, I think part of it is I focused so much on the research on the youth, but I didn't attest to, in many ways, the U.S. athletes are learning to have a more interdependent self as well.
That's nice, yeah.
Because it goes back to I felt each culture had its own strengths, and I wanted, through this mutual learning process, to have them benefit each other. So the research I have done has shown that a lot of companies are saying that when even the Vietnamese students who graduate college don't have the kinds of skills that they would like them to have. You know, they're not used to critical thinking or working in teams or these kinds of soft skills that their education system does not at all emphasize. So in some ways it allows the Vietnamese college students to develop those as well, because they're having to teach in front of a group of kids often for the first time. You know, most of them are very introverted and quiet. They're not used to being leaders, but you know, they're in a very critical role because they have to translate back and forth between the Vietnamese students and the Americans. In terms of employment, yeah. Well, one idea that I really would like to develop is this pipeline approach. So we already, the Vietnamese college students enter as volunteers, and we usually hire them as staff members. So I had this one case where a Vietnamese college student was the first year she was a college volunteer. The second year she was what's called a director of a group of 8 college students. The next year she was head of one of the sites. And then I think the last year she revised the whole curriculum and she helped me implement the randomized trial. So I'd like to create these opportunities for continued growth for all the participants. And my idea would be to do that for the Vietnamese youth. So not just provide this summer program, but once they get to high school and college, hire them as local coordinators in the community. So that could be a way of providing not just skills, but also